termed an amino acid because it has an amine group. So, hormones, chemicals that are listed as a monoamine, which includes our neurotransmitters, okay? Dopamine, epinephrine, norepinephrine, melatonin, and then thyroid hormone is included in this. The peptides, the ones that are simply a chain of amino acids. This is my oxytocin, antidiuretic hormone. Where are they found? Anterior or posterior? My posterior pituitary. They are the only two in the posterior, and they are both peptides. The other ones get coded for, or I shouldn't say coded for, are given directions for in the anterior, because everything else is anterior pituitary. Insulin, releasing and inhibiting from the hypothalamus. Hormones from that anterior. They can either be a polypeptide. Poly means how many? More than one, two or more. What about a glycoprotein?
Sugar-based proteins?
Sugar. Has a sugar chain on protein. That is because of their action. Do they need to travel through the blood? Do they need to talk to simply the cells next to them? It depends on their action. Then, if that's the case, what do they do to the cells they encounter? Because the job of a hormone is to affect the activity of their target cell. So what action is that chemical going to have on its target cell? Secretion of our hormones, it is not done at any type of steady rate. We don't have this constant production of every hormone in our body. Actually, when you think about the size of the pituitary gland and hormones that get secreted, we only need a couple of molecules. We don't need a lot. We don't have constant levels of the hormones in the bloodstream. We're going to find that the secretion is either controlled by the nervous system, another chemical, another hormone, or something humoral. And I don't mean funny, ha-ha. This is the humor of the body, fluids, all right? If it is a nerve stimulus that's going to control the secretion, some of those glands are innervated, meaning they have nerve fibers that lead to them, and that elicits some type of response. For example, in times of stress, when the sympathetic division kicks in, the medulla of the adrenal gland, which is innervated by a sympathetic fiber, that means it goes to that medulla and tells it, make your product. our epi and our norepi, and dopa. Does that make sense? If it is a hormonal stimulus that needs to control the secretion, this is my hormones from my hypothalamus regulating the anterior and the posterior pituitary. That will then, in turn, affect something else in the body. If it is humoral, this is referring to what are the levels in the blood. Those levels get detected by certain areas of the brain, and that can in turn cause the release or the stopping of a chemical getting made, secreted. So I can control it in one of these three ways. Once I get the chemical, the hormone, it has to be transported. Now, your textbook gets into great detail, but I can explain this much easier with this picture. Do you guys remember how something could be water soluble or lipid soluble in the body? Yes, no, maybe.
Yes.
Okay. Hormones, these chemicals, are the same way. Now, if I have a cell that is going to make a hormone that's water soluble, look what's happening. The cell makes its product, the hormone, wraps it in a vesicle. That vesicle attaches to the plasma membrane, and the plasma membrane simply spits the chemical out. Is everybody following me? Now, that means that was the process of exocytosis. If the product is water soluble, it simply gets to move freely through the bloodstream. When you look at your hormones, the tables that I've given you to look at, you'll see whether they're water soluble or lipid soluble. Water soluble simply get to move through the bloodstream. When they reach a target cell, remember, hormones have to attach to a receptor. Every hormone has a target cell. Is everybody following me?
Yes.
So now this hormone attaches to the receptor on the target cell. Once that happens, the goal of my hormone was to alter the activity of the target cell. It has now reached its target cell, it has been received, and now it can alter its activity. If the hormone is lipid soluble, what do you remember about the plasma membrane? What's the makeup of the plasma membrane?
Lipid bilayer.
A lipid bilayer. So therefore, if the product is a lipid soluble, it can simply pass through the cell that made it. Does everybody see that? That makes it into the bloodstream. However, It cannot travel freely. Lipid soluble has to have a transport protein. They're called globulins. Perfect time of year for it. I think about little goblins. Okay? The transport protein for the lipid soluble hormone is a globulin.
So do they just hang out and wait for one of these to come
Yes.
along, or?
Yes. For example, thyroid hormone has a thyroglobulin, a transport protein for the thyroid hormone. Now, once it makes its way through the bloodstream, gets to the target cell, wait a minute, what's the difference here? What do you see the chemical of lipid soluble doing that you did not see water soluble do?
It penetrates the cell.
Lipid soluble penetrates. It moves through the plasma membrane of the target cell. It moves through the plasma membrane of the target cell with the overall goal of affecting the activity of the cell. Because that's what these chemicals have to do. These chemicals have to reach their target cell and alter their activities, which is their mode of action. So all of these hormones that get produced, some are water soluble, some are lipid soluble. When they reach their target cell, alter the activity. So how's it going to do that? If I have a chemical, a hormone, all right, that can be received by the receptor, all right, but it did not move through the plasma membrane. That's my water soluble. So what does it do? It simply causes activities to get started in the protein, or a protein I should say, in the protein that accepts it, that begins to start activity. The activity crosses the hormone. That begins to create a series of actions in the cytoplasm of that cell. Okay? Now, once again, note, the chemical never crossed the plasma membrane. The activities got started by the receptor protein. So those activities are going to create a series of activities, or change them, alter them, that will basically activate an enzyme, and that creates a lot of metabolic effects. Meaning, we altered the protein of that